This episode is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com, the #1 seller of games and gaming accessories. And GatheringMagic.com, the #1 resource for Magic the Gathering news and articles.
Hello everybody, I'm Mike from the Mana Pool. Last video of the day, glad I still got this shirt. This is the Mimeoplasm Commander deck. Alright, the Mimeoplasm. This was the first, and actually so far only ones, of the pre-con commander decks that I went and customized. I'm kind of working on the Kalia one right now, but I haven't gotten a chance to play it, so it's not ready to be revealed yet. But yeah, the Mimeoplasm, I just thought it was so cool, especially after a test game that we all played to record for the show, where Chewy was playing this, and every single time he cast the Mimeoplasm, it was something just absolutely awesome and terrifying. It was great stuff. So that's why I decided to take this and rebuild it. That's the first one of those decks I customized. So let's see here, the mana base. Got your standard stuff. Let me just pick up all these cards. I can flip through them real bit. Why are there so many lands? You'd think this deck was like 100 cards or something. What the heck? Alright, there we go. So yeah, you got your couple dual lands, paint lands, crew lands, multi-lands, Temple of the False God, awesome. Storage land, word. Fetch lands, Thawing Glaciers, the ultimate fetch land. I love Thawing Glaciers. And all your basic lands right here. Nothing too fancy going on there. Word. Mana Vault. Gotta play with Mana Vault. It's in like almost every commander deck I have. It's amazing. I love Mana Vault. It's great. Great stuff. And then we have a Soul Ring, because it's a commander deck, and it came with this deck. Then we have a Elves of Deep Shadow, because it's in the colors, and I really, really like this art. I love it. Awesome. Grim Monolith, also something that shows up in a lot of my commander decks. Urborg Elf, mana elf in our colors. The appropriate color signets for the deck. Basalt Monolith, also quite useful. Cultivate, just because there's a ton of basic lands in here, and Cultivate is just an awesome card. I wish I had an extra copy of Konama's Reach that I could shove in here, because I'd play that too. Alright, random utility cards. Lightning Greaves, don't need to go into detail because it's a commander deck. Spell Crumple, because it came with a deck, and I decided to leave it in there when I was changing it. I usually don't care to play counter magic in Commander because I don't know, it's just harder to sit back and hold cards and be reactive when there's all these awesome cards in your hand that you could be playing, and it's just boring to have to sit there and wait. Dismal Failure I have in here because it makes someone discard a card, and getting stuff in the graveyard is a very important part of the Mimeoplasm, and we'll get more into that later. Tutoring and card draw. So Mind's Aglow, basically a prosperity that everyone can join in on, draw a bunch of cards. Getting cards into people's hands is a great way to eventually get them into the graveyard, which is why I play a lot of these effects. Have For Real Prosperity right here. And Howling Mine. People usually appreciate stuff like this, even if I'm doing it to eventually, destroy everyone. They appreciate it while it's around. Similarly, Kami the Crescent Moon, another Howling Mine guy. Bloodletter Quill, a draw card thing that's pretty well overlooked in my opinion for decks that can play it. It's good stuff. Jace Beleren, draw some cards, and also sometimes dumps a bunch of cards in someone's graveyard, but usually he doesn't live that long, so I mean, that's not what I'm using for anyway. Realms Uncharted. I really like using this card, even if I'm just getting a bunch of basic land with it. It's like, hey, land, that's cool. Fact or Fiction. There is like just no good choice an opponent can ever make with Fact or Fiction. You always get exactly what you want. There's just nothing bad about this card. Syphon Mind, draw a bunch of cards, especially in a big game, and make everyone discard some stuff, hopefully to fuel the Mimeoplasm. Mole Drifter, drawing me some cards, and I can evoke him and dump him in the graveyard, and maybe the Mimeoplasm will be a flying guy. Really, I don't end up using my own creatures a whole lot for the Mimeoplasm, usually for their abilities, and then I use other people's creatures for the +1/+1 counters. But there's just tons of stuff going in the graveyard during the course of a Commander game, tons of stuff to choose from. I don't really need to rely all that much on my own deck to do it, but we'll get more into the other creatures later. See Recursion Recall. If you don't know what Recall does, you pay a blue and double X and discard X cards to pick up X cards from your graveyard and put them back into your hand. That's really useful, especially if there's something in my hand that I would rather have in the graveyard, and there's always stuff in the graveyard that a person would want back. Stitch Together, very useful. Just throw someone right back onto the battlefield, because I'm going to have Threshold. Don't worry about it. It's going to happen. Regrowth, classic recursion for any deck that can play it. Eternal Witness, same thing. Recollect, regrowth, except it costs one more, which is slightly more fair, so that's cool. Beacon of Unrest, just dig into someone's graveyard, get whatever, throw a parade, dance around a chair, all that stuff. And Living Death. Living Death could get dangerous with a bunch of stuff going to other people's graveyards too. So maybe I'm more likely to use this as mass removal, but sometimes I might just do it as a mass recursion just to see what happens. Just to be funny. Rise from the Grave. That's what it does. Okay, removal. Barter in Blood. Everyone sacrifices 2 creatures. That's pretty big. I like Barter in Blood. Syphon in Flesh. Not Syphon in Flesh, just Syphon Flesh, just normal like. Get some zombies, get rid of some creatures, cool. Acidic Slime, very useful. Death Touch is also very useful, and very nice to grab back with Mimeoplasm, because he also gets the end of the battlefield trigger. It's great. Relic Crush can get 2 things at once. In a format full of singletons and with big effects, it's always great to be able to get 2 things at once. Alright. Oh no, this is still removal. Dark Hatchling is cool removal, and he's also a creature, which means I can also Mimeoplasm to do it again if he dies. And he flies. Just woo! Life's Finale is pretty much everything this deck could want out of a mass removal spell. Kill all the creatures, and then go dig into someone's library and put 3 more creatures in their graveyard. Just wonderful stuff. And Butcher of Malakir is a Grave Pact who likes to fly around and hit people for 5. Sheoldred is just vicious. Vicious, vicious. And you'd be surprised how often the Swamp Walk is very relevant, and that people forget about that part. It's brutal. Tornado Elemental is really useful removal. 6 damage to each creature with flying. That'll solve a lot of problems right there. And he can push through his damage like a Roxor Thorn Elemental, which is also amazing. Especially if it's a Mimeoplasm copy with a ton of +1/+1 counters on it. That's great. There's your Commander combat damage. Only got to count 21 for that. Avatar of Woe is the last bit of removal, and it's not too hard to be able to cast her for just 2. Alright, so I talked about getting cards directly into graveyards so that I can mess with them. So, Shared Trauma. Every once in a while you might get another player at the table who's willing to help you out with Shared Trauma, but it's rare. So usually it's just me dumping a bunch of mana into this, but hey, it still does what I want to get done. And there's really nothing else like it in just a normal non-joined forces kind of way, at least none that I can think of, at least not that gets every opponent. See. Chains of Mephistopheles. Okay. You saw all the mass draw effects earlier. All right, let me paraphrase to you exactly what Chains of Mephistopheles actually does. Except for your normal draw that you take during your turn. For every other draw you would take, instead, first you discard a card and then draw a card. But if you can't discard a card, then you mill for one and skip the draw instead. So with a fair number of mass extra draw things going around, prosperities, Howling Mines, stuff like that, there are lots of cards jumping in the graveyard just out of nowhere, and it's just so hilarious. And it makes everyone else's draw spells. It makes them really reluctant to use them because it's just a world of fun for me when Chains of Mephistopheles hits the table. All right. Sword of Body and Mind is pretty good at dumping a bunch of cards into the graveyard. I'm sure everyone out there knows what that does. Similarly to Sword of Feast and Famine, maybe I should have put this with the mana making cards because that's the really big part of its ability. But the discard part is really important too. Memory Erosion, straight up mill, waiting around for everyone to cast spells. Windfall is really cool for getting cards in graveyards and for drawing cards. But it's also really cool when there's an active Chains of Mephistopheles because then everyone discards their hand and mills for a bunch, and that's funny. Buried Alive, if I'm playing the Mimeoplasm or some deck like it, gotta play with Buried Alive. Similarly, gotta play with Dreamborn Muse, no questions. Breathstealer's Crypt is something I found in my binder that I was really glad to notice when I was building this deck. Basically, it replaces every draw with a reveal, and then if it's a creature, the player has to either pay 3 life or throw it in the graveyard, and that can really start to add up, especially with several mass draw effects happening. The way it interacts with Chains of Mephistopheles is pretty complicated, and I would probably have to sit here and think for a few minutes to talk it out, so I'm not going to do it right now. I'll leave that as an exercise to the listener. Extractor Demon is an awesome scary creature that likes to throw cards into graveyards. He's cool. Alright, now let's just talk about some of the cool creatures I have in here that I like to turn Mimeoplasm into. I like to turn Mimeoplasm into Primordial Hydra because he'll also double the extra +1/+1 counters he gets. Even though I'm not getting anything out of X when I do it that way. Sewer Nemesis, oh, he's in the wrong section. Sewer Nemesis was supposed to be in the dump cards in the graveyard section. He's awesome. Thought Gorger is just a really awesome creature. Like, I don't mind discarding my hand to play Thought Gorger because he's huge after that. And he has trample. And if he leaves play, he doesn't have to go to the graveyard. It's just that if he leaves play at all, I get to draw more cards. And it's really hilarious to turn the Mimeoplasm into him because I get the +1/+1 counters from discarding and the extra +1/+1 counters from the other exiled creature. So then when the Mimeoplasm leaves play, I draw a ton of cards and I'm good. Straight. Skithiryx has a panic button in case something really horrible is about to happen. That's all I have to say about that. Vulturous Zombie is just hilarious with all the cards going in the graveyard. He gets big really fast. Scythe Spectre is a truly terrifying specter. Makes people lose a bunch of life because all of my opponents have to discard a card. Yeah, it's just great. Vorash the Hunter is in these colors, and he's also a big old flying guy, and he's also all about +1/+1 counters, and he's just cool. I just like him. Rexiel is also in our colors, and he can let me play, however many of the awesome cards people had cast in previous turns or have, gotten thrown into the graveyards by some other method. Guy's Revenge, sorry, not Guy's Avenger, that's something completely different. Let's not play Guy's Avenger, that's terrible. Guy's Revenge is so awesome because he has haste and other people can't target him with anything useful. When I first started playing this deck, I screwed up with him many times. I turned the Mimeoplasm into him, and I would proceed to like equip him with stuff, but I'm not allowed to do that because the equipments weren't green and no one noticed until like a week later. I felt kind of bad about it. But now I know. See, Fungal Shambler. I really like Fungal Shambler. He's a 6/4 with trample, and whenever he deals combat damage to a player, that player discards a card, and I draw a card, which is great, you know. Trample, woo. Draw a card, woo. Discard a card, awesome. Getting to the end here, all right. Finally, Scion of Darkness. Steal stuff out of other people's graveyards. If I draw him, I can just cycle him into my graveyard, and I can just turn the Mimeoplasm into him later. This is great, cool stuff. So yeah, messing with graveyards, freaking people out, the Mimeoplasm, I love it. Thanks everybody. Once again, I'm Mike from the Mana Pool. Check us out at manapool.com. Subscribe to and favorite CMDR decks. I'm going to do some laundry now. Thank you. Good night.